Greetings, I'm Russ North, and this video consists of 5 vignettes that correspond to each of the lessons learned that I wrote about in the reflection and research paper. The first section is my reflections on learning and what I learned about how people learn. Since I've been an educator, one aspect of how people learn that I've heard lots of disagreement on is the use of digital games or gamification in the classroom. Some teachers believe that digital games are just a distraction and have no benefit for student learning, while others feel that digital games are an excellent way to keep students engaged and at the same time increasing their knowledge of the content being covered. As a longtime gamer, I began playing digital games in the mid-1980s with the text-based adventures like Zork and the early graphic adventures like Wizardry. I know the motivation that digital games can have on a person, whether it's to reach the next level, score more points, or earn a badge. The drive to achieve the goal is sometimes addictive. I feel that digital games or elements of games can effectively motivate students to achieve more in the classroom. During my Theoretical Foundations of Educational Technology class, I decided to complete my synthesis paper on the subject of gamification. While conducting the research, I was surprised to find that although hundreds of articles had been published about the subject, very few referenced any learning theories. With no empirical data, how could I have any evidence of my beliefs? However, all was not lost. Since I've written my synthesis paper, there have been a number of scholarly articles released on gamification. The data recorded during some of the experiments demonstrated a correlation to gamification and cognitive learning. Now that I have my data, I can once again champion gamification. Additionally, it's important to note that like any educational tool in a classroom, the use of games and gamification must be used properly. When I created my game, No Backbone, I did so as a content practice tool for my students. This game would not serve well as a way to introduce materials because prior knowledge of invertebrates is needed to be successful in the game. Without that prior knowledge, the students would fail and get discouraged, and the game would not help them learn at all. The second lesson is about the art and science of teaching, and one of the most important parts of the art and science of teaching that I learned was using social media as a method to communicate information to my students and for my students. Before I continue, you must understand that although I have used social media for personal reasons, I became frustrated with applications like Facebook. There were too many people that would post pictures of every meal they had eaten, or more frustrating to me than that are the hundreds of times someone would post a chart or graph that allegedly supported their point of view on a subject. The chart had no data attached to it, there was no source information, no references, no population information. Anyone could just put some numbers in a spreadsheet and make a graph out of it, and said it was true information, as this humorous example shows. With my negative feelings towards social media, I never considered including a tool like social media in my classroom. Then I created my social media lesson and realized that I had been missing a great opportunity to open the world to my students with social media. I was also missing out on an effective and simple manner to share student work with parents and family members. Another important facet of using social media is that students will be shown the proper use of social media. Dr. Howard Reingold has listed 5 literacies that students must exercise to effectively use social media: attention, participation, collaboration, network awareness, and critical consumption. By integrating social media into my classroom, the students will gain 21st century skills which will help them the rest of their lives. Some of the social media applications that I will use in the future include Facebook, which I will use to set up a classroom account and communicate information to parents. I also plan on using Twitter to be able to have my students compile questions and send them to subject matter experts. I also plan on using Skype so my students can talk to and hear from other people around the world, whether it's a group of students in a different classroom or a person of interest that can provide my students with more content knowledge in a particular area. The use of social media in my classroom is going to be a huge benefit to my students, and it is perhaps the key point in the art and science of teaching that I learned in this program. Design and evaluation of instruction is the third lesson. My EdTech 542 Technology Supported Project-Based Learning course, or PBL, had the most influence on me for this lesson. I had, of course, heard of PBL, but thought of that just giving students a project, like make a diorama, and provide a rubric, and that was proper PBL. I'd seen many teachers use these kinds of projects as summative assessments, but I always preferred more quantitative assessments. The first week of the course, I knew that my thoughts on PBL were wrong. There were many more elements to PBL than just the assignment and the rubric. To be truly effective, a PBL unit has to be properly planned. The students need a driving question to provide motivation, and the units need to have formative and summative assessments. While I was creating my PBL unit, What a Disaster, I began to see the benefit of this inquiry-based learning design, and even more benefit in using performance-based rubrics for assessing student learning. Studies that have been conducted about project-based learning and student knowledge have proven a positive correlation between the two. Additionally, the PBL model allows students with more control of their learning, which results in more ownership. And, like the integration of social media, PBL provides the students with another method of practicing media literacy, collaboration, and critical thinking, all of which have been identified as important 21st century skills. As a proper PBL unit would have many different stages as the students research, design, and create the project, the use of social media could be included as an element of that unit. For instance, the students would have to use the classroom Twitter account to contact a subject matter expert in the field and ask some questions that need to be answered for their project to be successful. Technology also makes the instructional design of PBL units simpler. Websites like Buck Institute of Education, BBI.com, provide countless resources for educators like myself to use, and even has instructional videos to help someone create a quality PBL unit. My future students will be benefiting from those resources because I will be creating and implementing more and more PBL units each school year. Lesson 4 is about networking and professional collaboration. One element of the MET program that I really enjoyed was the collaboration with my peers, as well as with the professors. It was nice to have a network of people that I could use to ask questions, get opinions from, and receive feedback on how to make an artifact better. The collaboration amongst my classmates made me realize that a group of people don't need to be in the same room to be able to have a rich, informative discussions. Most of the time, we weren't even in the same time zones. Without the input and feedback from the others in my classes, some of my artifacts would not have been as creative and as useful. This includes my robotics final project, the Grand Sumo Tournament, my final PBL unit, What a Disaster, and my final game, No Backbone. For each of those projects, my classmates helped me and guided me and provided me with ideas for improvement. Most importantly, I was able to get some great resources and material ideas from my peers' artifacts. Those valuable tools will assist me in providing my students with a better education. As almost by coincidence, when I began to realize the importance of collaboration amongst my MET peers, my school district began implementing plans to have focused collaboration each week as a method of trying to improve student achievement. I was first apprehensive of the new program and didn't realize how rewarding the collaboration would be for my students, my collaboration group, and myself. My opinion changed after I started thinking about the successes of networking and collaborating in the MET program. Collaborating online in the program also prepared me for the professional learning network that the Department of Defense Educational Activity, DODEA, has established using Schoology. These communities of excellence, as they are called, allow me to collaborate with other 6th grade science teachers throughout DODEA. Since I'm the only 6th grade science teacher at my complex, and the nearest one is over 700 kilometers away, having the ability to reach out to a peer is very valuable. Already I've been sharing ideas and materials with my fellow educators all over the world. I've even shared some of my creations from the MET program, like the No Backbone game with some of them. DODEA will be implementing the next-gen science standards next year, so having a network of peers will be invaluable as we all try to determine the best ways to have our students achieve those standards. my professional learning network will help each of us overcome some of the stress that manifests during these changes in curriculum. The final lesson asked us to reflect on the connection between research and practice. During the summer session of 2015, I took the EdTech 513 multimedia course. It was during that course that I realized that many of the multimedia presentations that I had created or used as an educator were actually detrimental to my students' cognitive learning. While reading and researching for the course, I discovered the cognitive learning theory of multimedia by Dr. Richard Mayer. Part of the theory is the redundancy principle, which states that adding text along with graphics and an audio narrative would overload a person's ability to process the information. This would result in less knowledge being learned. My presentations did on numerous occasions violate that principle. As such, I began to revise my materials to follow the theory. Another principle of Dr. Mayer's that is part of the cognitive learning theory of multimedia is the coherence principle. This principle argues that including any items to a multimedia presentation that is not directly related to the lesson would result in lower student cognitive performance. This was a principle that I had a hard time agreeing with. I always used a hook when beginning a lesson, and sometimes that hook was not directly related to the lesson, just loosely related. I seemed to have great effect using these hooks. The students would be more engaged and interested in the lesson. I researched further into the coherence principle and found that Dr. Mayer's data was gathered from a very small population with lessons on only one subject, so I refuted his information and continued to include my hooks. I was not the only one that felt the coherence principle is not very solid. In 2015, a group of German psychologists did an experiment to determine if there was an effective result of including seductive materials. That is, materials that are interesting but not necessary. The findings of that research demonstrated that the addition of seductive materials to the multimedia presentation has negative effects on student learning. So, regardless of my gut feelings, I have realized that I was responsible for lowering my students' learning. As a result of conducting the research about the theories, I have changed the hooks in my lessons to be directly related to the content being presented. That means a lot less Far Side cartoons for my students to laugh at as I begin a lesson. Thank you for watching.